Ballafire is a 1941 screwball comedy directed by Howard Hawks, his first time on the podcast, and is written by the screenwriting duo of Charles Brackett and guess who? Billy Wilder. Yes, his return to the podcast. It's starring Gary Cooper and Barbara Stanwyck, and yeah, it's an absolute trip. We're getting into how funny it is, how romantic it is, how much of a trip it is. This week on the Golden Hour Film Podcast. Hello everyone and welcome back to episode 45. Not 49. Hang on, shit, sorry. What episode is this?
We are at episode 45. You are correct.
Yeah, 45 of the podcast. Apologies for that. Lost track of time there. So yeah, Howard Hawks' first time on the podcast this week, and yeah, it's pretty like I said at the end of last week's episode, a change of pace. We've had 3 good punches in a row, that's fair to say. Casablanca, into Roman Holiday, into Brief Encounter. Yeah, I think it's, if you're looking for a happy ending in any of those films, well, I don't want to spoil too much, but yeah, maybe those aren't the films for you. But guess what? Maybe, spoiler alert, Ball of Fire is, and who better to get into it than with Dan, my co-host, not guest host, Harry Bailey. How are you, Harry?
I am good. We are talking about a movie that doesn't make you want to kill yourself. So I'm doing really good, actually. Nice, as you said, change of pace. Because, yeah, we have covered some depressing movies this month. Romance at the movies, guys. We totally misjudged
Did not get the memo.
levels of depression in each film, like the ratio of depression to uplifting romance in this romantic month of ours. But yeah, nice to sort of try and kind of balance the scales a little bit with this admittedly jollier, happier, more sentimental movie. Screwball comedy, as you said. Yeah, great subgenre of films that kind of was... Yeah, what can I say? Not like the other 3 movies that we've covered so far. And yeah, I said it on last week's podcast, but good lord, is this cast absolutely filling to the brim with talent. You got Gary Cooper, you got Barbara Stanwyck, you got Dana Andrews, who was a star in multiple episodes as well. You got S.Z. Sakall, who's been in another movie this month, let alone the rest of the podcast. He was in Casablanca. You've got Henry Travers, of course, who's been in a bunch of movies on the podcast, but most notably from It's a Wonderful Life. And of course, arguably most importantly, you've got my boy with one line, Elisha Cook Jr. He plays a waiter in this movie. Go on, Elisha.
You've also got Oscar Homolka, who's been on the podcast before. He was in... no, sorry, he wasn't. That's my bad. I thought we had covered this Hitchcock film. We actually haven't. But yeah, Oscar Homolka. When I saw Oscar Homolka, who plays one of the professors, I was like, oh, no, that guy. I just assumed that he had popped up in the podcast. And one of the many Hitchcock 40s films that we had covered, but no, he actually hasn't.
Yeah. No, there's a bunch of guys in here who are vaguely familiar, and I'm sure will reappear on the podcast. Yeah. But yeah, crazy cast. Everyone's great in this movie. Yeah. And believe it or not, let me just fact check this, but I believe this may have been my first ever Gary Cooper movie.
Well,
I'll tell you now. It was indeed. This is the first time I've ever seen Gary Cooper in a movie. And I'm going to go from none to 2 very soon. But we'll talk about that movie at the end of the episode when we talk about next month's arc. But yeah, this is my first ever Gary Cooper movie. And it is safe to say that I thoroughly enjoyed his performance as a professor. There's 8 professors all working on this encyclopedia. But yeah, the thing that's different about Gary Cooper is instead of being a small, old, frail professor, he's just a really tall, jacked, handsome professor who's quite young. Sticks out like a sore thumb. But yeah, that adds to the screwball level of the comedy, the absurdity of the film. Because not to say that like professors can't be as attractive as Gary Cooper, but just juxtaposing him with the other 7 professors is very, very funny in its own right. Because yeah, what a handsome guy he is. But yeah, Barbara Stanwyck is in this movie. Legit one of my favorite actresses ever. She's so good in absolutely everything, and yeah, she continues to just be Barbara Stanwyck, which is nothing short of amazing. I really did enjoy this. Spoiler free. Really enjoyed this, and yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about this. But yeah, before we do, leave a like on the video. Leave a comment if you have seen Ball of Fire before, because it's a bit of an underrated Howard Hawks movie, it's safe to say. And I'm telling you now, spoiler free, I would highly, highly, highly recommend this. Spoiler free, Shane, what do you think of it?
Yeah, I couldn't stop laughing at this the first time I saw it. It's so inventive visually. It's gags, like it's just a mile a minute jokes. Like for every joke you laugh at, you've probably missed 3. Like it's rapid fire. It's also based. I mean, we haven't covered any Disney films on the podcast, but guess what? It's also inspired by, is probably a better way to put it, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And by the way, there's a couple of little,
gets referenced in the movie.
Yeah, it literally gets referenced. One of the presses is called Professor Oddly, which obviously isn't the name of a dwarf, but it could be. It sounds like it could be, and that can't be a coincidence. Like, it's very much playing into that kind of that Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, obviously kind of comparison. So you have Barbara Stanwyck in there, who's, again, like Harry said, amazing in everything. She's so perfect for Billy Wilder dialogue, as we saw in Double Indemnity. She has a way of delivering Billy Wilder and Charles Brackett dialogue, like, in a way that few people can. Like, just, it feels so natural, even though it's obviously like so specific to them. She has a way of making it her own. This is way better from Gary Cooper than his other performance in a Billy Wilder. Reading out Billy Wilder lines, Love in the Afternoon is, I think I've mentioned on the episode we did covering Roman Holiday, he's not good in that movie. I don't particularly like the movie either, but he's really bad and he's really miscast. He's not miscast in this, he's really, really good in this, playing the kind of dorky but obviously hunky professor. And yeah, Dana Andrews back at the podcast as well, after Laura, after Where the Sidewalk Ends, noir icon. Just so many reasons to love. Yeah, so many reasons to love this film. Howard Hawks, like I said, his first, probably not last, let's be honest, directorial
definitely not last
picture. So yeah, I think there's probably going to be a few more to come from him. But unless you have anything else, without further ado, I think we'll get into the film.
Yeah, now the only other thing I was going to say is, because obviously this is from the early 40s, and it's worth noting that Barbara Stanwyck, as part of her duty to her country, was pen pal with a bunch of soldiers in the war, and they all asked that they send posters of her from this movie because they were all obsessed with the movie Ball of Fire. So yeah, just thought that was a funny thing. And also it got nominated for a bunch of Academy Awards, because let's be real, most movies we talk about do get nominated for a bunch of Academy Awards, but yeah, this one did too, and Barbara Stanwyck got nominated for Best Actress.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, so the credits roll. We automatically know we're in for a good time, because we have directed by Howard Hawks, we have screenplay by Charles Brackett and Billy Wilder, and we have cinematography by Gregg Toland, the guy who obviously shot Citizen Kane, one of the greatest cinematographers of all time. So you know this thing is going to be a trip visually. It's going to be very inventive. It's going to be very, it's going to have a lot of flair. So automatically you know you're in for a good time with the camera. We see kind of text on the screen which tells us that 8 professors are working on an encyclopedia in New York. Very smart men who know a lot about everything except for one thing. And well, we'll find out very quickly what that one thing is. So we cut to these guys who are quite studious individuals, I think it's fair to say. They're taking their kind of what
nerds,
seems to
as Luke Gallows would say. Nerds.
So they're taking what seems
he just
to
got
be,
released by WWE as well.
He did actually, yeah, him and Carl Anderson. They'll be rehired in a couple of years, don't worry. That's always the way. So these guys are walking through Central Park, I guess it is, in New York. I think more than likely. So it seems to be like their exercise for the day. It's the one time they get out. They maybe once a day they'll get out away from the rigors of their studies and their work. So they're in Seltzer Park. They're going through Seltzer Park on their kind of whatever. They're on their out and about on their day. Gary Cooper's character though, Professor Professor Potts. He's kind of buried in a book. So even then, he's just buried in the work. Potts is saying that, listen, lads, we have to return to work now. They're like, oh, can we just stay out for a little bit longer? He's like, no, we're already behind. We've been working on this for 9 years. We're in the home stretch now. We've only got 3 years left, and then we can finally relax. So 9 years, by the way, already they've been working on this tome.
Which begs the question: what age was Gary Cooper when he started this encyclopedia?
Well, in fairness, we do get. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but we do get an insight into his.
Yeah, he was a child genius.
As a child genius, yeah. So chances are he may have been working there. He's always been like this. Anyway, they get home and Miss Bragg, the housekeeper, is kind of, she's there, she's kind of asking them what they want. Professor Audley, she's kind of annoyed that someone's stolen some strawberries. So we kind of get she's almost like the matriarch of the house, even though she's not the mother, obviously. But she's kind of keeping them in line, even though she actually works for them. But she's pissed off that someone's stolen some strawberries. Professor Audley, who's probably the one character who gets the most to do of these 7 professors, the 7 dwarf-like figures, obviously of the piece. He's the one who kind of has the most to do. He's like, listen, it was me. I was studying strawberries and I got a sudden craving, so I went to the fridge and I stole some. Then someone comes in and Potts starts to correct Mrs. Bragg's grammar because he's the English professor.
Yeah, Miss well. So he said, I was studying strawberries, but I got a sudden craving for them. And then S.Z. Sakall's character, Professor Magenbruch, says, basically she says, you're currently doing your part of, because they're all on the letter S at the minute, the encyclopedia, and he's doing sex, and she says, I hope you don't get any ideas with that one. But, as you said, it's the typical Billy Wilder writing disclaimer for the podcast. We aren't able to tell you how funny this movie is because there's like a joke every 20 seconds. So forgive us if we don't say your favorite line of this movie. It is fucking impossible. Do you know how hard it is to take notes on some movies? Like, some movies are so easy to take notes on and it's great. Anything written by Billy Wilder is bordering on impossible to get notes on.
So much packed in there, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You're doing your notes and you look up and you realize it's been like 10 minutes and you're like, I have to go back again. It's so hard to keep up. So yeah, you gotta draw a line at some point and just say, I'll just remember my favorite lines.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Miss Totten comes in with her kind of lawyer, Mr. Larson, and she is kind of the benefactor of this whole endeavor. Her father actually started it, so turns out that her father, the reason he started it is because this is again just such a funny thing. So the reason her father actually started to he wants this to do this whole encyclopedia. He starts to
he's funding it out of his well, basically.
He's funding it out of his well, and the reason for this is that he's pissed off that he wasn't mentioned in a previous encyclopedia for inventing the toaster. So it's just, it's such a funny thing. She says that already today, $283,000 have been spent on this. It's probably going to be up to over 300,000 at some point. By the time they're finished, who knows? It might even break 500,000. Who knows at this point? She says, listen, I'm weary, I'm tired, I just want this thing to end. How long more is it going to take? And Professor Potts says probably another 3 or 4 years. She's annoyed, but as soon as Potts says it, then she starts to flutter her eyebrows because it's Gary Cooper. And she's more inclined to trust what he says over anyone else because they're all just old farts who cares about them. When Gary Cooper says 3 or 4 years, she's like, oh yeah, fair enough, okay, 3 or 4 years. You have my blessing.
Professor Gurkakov, basically tickles him when he's talking to her. Whenever he's like, well, you know that I think it is, ugh. And she's like, oh, stop it, you. Because basically the doctors are also, the professors are also very much aware that Gary Cooper is a ridiculously handsome professor to be working on this project. So they exploit his good looks to basically, she literally just like agrees with him and leaves as soon as he starts talking. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. Yeah, so she leaves, and then the others are relieved. But then a garbage collector, a guy who works for the garbage, collecting garbage, he comes in just off the street. Like it's quite funny how he just goes in, thinks it's
strolls into their house.
Strolls in, he's like, listen lads, I need some help, yeah. And he's like,
they're like, oh, who are you? And he's like, oh, I'm the garbage man. And they're like, okay, continue.
So he's like, listen to some a quiz. So I need basically the right answers, because it's a few quid on the line. If I get enough correct answers, I can win some money here. So he asks him about Cleopatra, and then we see a bunch of amusing lines where we see some disagreements between maths and English, because they ask Professor Potts, and Potts gives his answer, and then the maths professor says that might be right for an English professor, but it's wrong for a mathematician. So Potts then, once the garbage collector then says smackaroo, he's like, what do you mean smackaroo? He's like, well, smackaroo is $1. He's like, no, something such and such $1. He's like, well, no, smackaroo is $1.
No, the slang for $1 is a book, actually.
Yeah, a book, yeah.
And
like, well,
yeah, basically, they're not talking down to the garbage man,
no.
But they don't pay him much attention.
Yeah.
And then as soon as he starts using slang, they're so enamored by him. It's almost like he's speaking a foreign language to them, and they all want to know what he's saying.
So Potts is like, oh my god, I'm a fraud. Like I've been buried in my books for so long that I haven't been out in the world. As we saw at the start of the film, where he was the one who actually wanted to get home before any of them.
Yeah.
So he says, I've been cooped up too long, and I've basically been slacking on my research. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go out and do some field research. So he goes out and he starts to pester some locals. So you see like this montage of him going around on the streets.
Yeah.
This is basically
like a paper boy, a pool hall, like women on the subway, just listening in on their conversations.
This is literally, by the way, what Charles Brackett and Billy Wilder did. Like they would literally do exactly this when they were writing the script. So anyway, he goes around and he talks to a pool boy, he talks to a paper boy, etc., etc. Then he goes to a show that night, and we see Barbara Stanwyck for the first time. So she comes out.
Importantly, we see Elisha Cook Jr. for the first and last time, because he's the waiter. He's clearing tables. Yes.
I didn't even realise that was Elisha Cook Jr., I'll be honest.
Fuck.
I didn't.
Oh, sound the Elisha Cook. He has, I think, 2 lines of dialogue in this film. At least one. But this is his only scene. God love him.
So, Sugar Puss O'Shea, by the way. What a name.
Yes, what a name.
Oh, what a name. Sugar Puss O'Shea. Okay, so she comes out, she starts to perform this song
meaning
called...
face, of course. They actually felt the need to... They felt the need to explain that in the movie, which is funny.
Yeah, and sugar meaning sweet. Yeah, so, yeah.
yeah, she's a nice face.
Yeah, quiet in the back. She starts to perform this song called Boogie. Does pretty well, and apparently it's not her vocals, which you wouldn't really know, to be honest. It's a pretty good lip sync job. But yeah, she does really good. Like, it's a great performance by Sugar Puss. And then she goes out.
And then, sorry to keep interrupting but just because I got to give my boy his shine. And then Professor Potts calls the waiter over, Elisha Cook Jr., and says, what was that song called? And he says, Boogie. And he says, what does boogie mean? And Elisha Cook Jr. is like, a what? And then he leaves. And that's Elisha Cook Jr. in this movie. You may continue. But I just wanted to get my boys. I needed him to get his shine in, Got to get his heat.
Good for him, yeah. Good. So, Sugar Puss comes back out and she's like, okay, what does you want to hear now? They say Boogie again. They can't get enough of Boogie. So, her and another guy from the band start to play like a much quieter, less instrumental version of it, where they're basically like, I don't know exactly, I'm terrible with instruments, but basically he's just on the table.
Yeah, it's a stripped back version, but instead of playing the drums, he uses 2 matches and a little bit of wood to... he's actually clearly a very talented drummer, because he is doing class in the first scene. But he's going away with the matches in at the end of the song, he lights a match, puts them together, and then gets her to blow it out. It's very well choreographed.
Yeah, and that's like crowd participation as well. So everyone gathers around this little table. But anyway, again, that brings the house down. Show's over. She goes back to her dressing room, and then we see two henchmen of a guy called Joe Lilac. By the way, the name of these two henchmen, Ozma and Pastrami. Just
So
genius.
great.
It's so genius.
So great.
Like, it's just a way to
But
make
as
it...
well, I don't want to say that this is why, but I think it's hilarious that the overweight guy is called Asthma and the guy with the squeaky voice is called Pastrami and not the other way around.
Yeah.
I'm gonna assume that that's why he named them.
Yeah.
But that's so funny to me that he would take the two henchmen's like nickname, so to speak, and then just for no reason at all just swap them over. So I don't want to just associate that with Billy Wilder because it could have been
Brackett, Charles Brackett.
Yeah, it could have been Brackett, but like either way, it is so funny that you take two characters who have like very distinguishing features, give them funny nicknames, and then for no reason at all swap the nicknames over.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. Like, it's a way to make her two henchmen stand out immediately instead of just giving them two generic names. Anyway, she says, "Listen, you're gonna have to get out of it quick. Cops are looking to subpoena you. The boss, Joe Lilac, he's been mixed up in a murder. He didn't do it. We swear he didn't do it. He's innocent. We tell you."
Definitely not.
No, he says he's been framed. It definitely wasn't him. You know he wouldn't be mixed up in anything like that. So Potts goes to the door, and they just assume that's the cops. So Pastrami and Asma hide, and it's just a brilliant, such a genius scene. He knocks on the door. She opens it. Well, he says initially, actually, "I want to speak to you regarding an investigation I'm conducting." So they obviously think that it's the police. She opens the door, and then we just see this. It's just this scene that goes on for probably about 30 seconds where they just have crossed wires. He's asking her questions. She thinks that they're interrogation questions. So she is like, "I'm not answering your questions. I don't know anything about this." He's convinced by her answers because of how many colloquialisms she uses and how much slang she uses that she's the perfect candidate for his research for slang. She thinks that because of his answers, or his questions, he's a cop, and eventually they manage to realize that he's a professor. So she's like, "Oh, okay, right, fair enough." Then she's like, "Okay, fair enough, I'm not cooperating though." He's like, "Okay, well, just take my card. If you change your mind, come to here." And then when she leaves, then she's getting ready to leg it. Just as he's walking out, then we actually do see the cops arrive looking for Sugar Puss. So they knock on the door. They bust open the door when there's no answer. The window's open. She's obviously done a legger. And then Joe Lilac's cronies, Asma and Pastrami, they're in the car with her in a taxi, and they're trying to come up with an idea of where to stash her for the night. Initially, it's supposed to be only for one night. They're like, "Listen, you can't go back to your apartment because the cops have it obviously under surveillance," and they're kind of hemming and hawing about what to do. And then the card of Professor Potts she kind of stumbles upon it, and she's like, "That's actually genius. Like, no one would think to look there." So guess what? We cut back to the house with the professors.
Yeah, it's quite clear that she's decided to hide there. But in the meantime, Potts is filling the rest of the professors in on the wild night he had because he went backstage in a nightclub. What? And they're all like obsessed with this story, and one like because a lot of their references, their cultural references, are so dated. So one of them is like, "Oh my god, I wonder what was happening. I wonder if there was like ballerinas performing in the It's like, no, actually, it's just a bunch of sleazy guys who like bouncers. But no, it's not like a grand show or anything. But yeah, he's basically talking about how she, again, similar to the garbage man, was speaking in a totally different language, and she is the perfect candidate because he's actually been handing those cards out to a bunch of characters who he's been meeting along the way because he wants to do a round table discussion where he can pick the brains of all these local people and basically get to the basis of their slang, where it originates from, and, you know, update his slang section of the encyclopedia when she shows up. And she shows up in a lavish dress, which, again, as Potts is quick to remind us, there are 7 bachelors and 1 widower here, so this is a lot for them considering they've all been locked up for 9 years. But she, after a while, convinces him to let her stay the night. She needs to obviously hide from the feds, but she gets Professor Magenbruch, the physician, to say that she might have a cold, and therefore she might have a temperature, and therefore she probably shouldn't go outside. But she sort of slowly undresses herself, like she takes her stockings off and she takes her jacket off, but she grabs her jacket, and one of the professors allows her to sleep in his room overnight because they're going to have this roundtable discussion at 9 a.m. the following morning. And she thinks she takes all her stuff with her upstairs, and then meanwhile, again, just such a funny thing that this is what's pinning him to the crime scene. But meanwhile, Joe Lilac is with the police because he left his pajamas at the crime scene
so
with his initials, embroidered into the pajamas, and it fits him perfectly. And he's like, these aren't mine. And basically, the thing that ties her to this is that she is his girlfriend who bought him said pajamas, and if they can get her to say that she bought the pajamas, then
exactly.
Open and shut case. Meanwhile, this really short goon is insisting that he try on the pajamas, and he tries them on. They clearly don't fit,
They're
and
like
he's
4
like, yeah,
sizes
because
too big.
He's like, it allows for my chest to expand at night, and I like my fingers to be covered by the sleeves because they get cold. And they were like, and what does the JL stand for if it's not Joe Lilac? And he's like, Jelly Bean Lollipop, obviously. And they're not listening at all to this guy. So the DA picks up the phone and he rings his guys and he's like, well, have you got O'Shea? And they're like, no. And he kind of freaks out a bit, and Lilac catches wind of this and essentially says, well, if your supposed evidence isn't coming tonight, then you can let me go home for now, at least, until you find your evidence, because I'm an innocent man as far as I'm concerned. And they let him leave, but the following morning, it turns out that Pastrami and Asma had left a case of Sugar Puss's clothes at the door, and again they spoke in slang, effectively telling them what the plan is. Like, they effectively told the professors what their plan is to keep her under wraps until everything blows over. But they said it in slang, so they hadn't a clue what they were saying. But they relayed the message, so yeah. She basically catches the idea that she has to stay there and hide. But she's also slept in, so she's late for the round table discussion. And when she goes down, Mrs. Braggs finds that, one of her stockings was left there overnight, and she freaks out at the idea that a woman stayed there overnight. And she is basically, the lads are trying to cover for her, and then she just skips on in, asks for help with her zipper, and then strolls into the round table meeting late, and Mrs. Braggs is absolutely appalled by the whole thing.
Yeah. So, she goes into the seminar, then we cut to like a few days later, where they've obviously been at this for a few days. So she's obviously been staying here for a few days. She sees a story in the newspaper that she's wanted for questioning, and she obviously tries to hide it because she doesn't want Potts or any of the other guys, or especially Miss Bragg, to find this and kick her to the curb. So she runs upstairs, she has to pack a bag, and she's getting ready to leave. But then...
she buys all the newspapers off the paperboy who's there as well, so that none of them can see them.
Yeah, and then there's a funny scene of the professors who are like, they start asking her for help for dance practice because the previous evening apparently she had been showing them some dance moves. So they put on some music and then they start to do the conga. And as this is happening, Miss Bragg then gives Potts an ultimatum. This girl has been too much of a pain in my ass. Either she goes or I go. And Potts is like, all right, fair enough. Like, obviously you're way too important here. So he goes into the study and then he finds this conga line going on. Yeah. She's asking to join in, but of course he's like, listen, lads, give us a minute here, will you? So they leave, and then he's like, listen, I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
He calls all the lads in and they have to have a meeting. and they kick her out of the room. And when she goes out, Pastrami and Asma are just hanging around the front door. So she goes out to them, and it turns out that Joe Lilac has proposed to her with a fucking enormous ring.
The size of this ring, by the way. The whole reason, by the way, Lilac wants to marry her is because a wife can't testify against the husband. Like, and she sees this. She's not too bothered by that though. She's like, she sees this ring.
She sees the ring and she's like, no, I'll take the ring. Actually,
that's
sweet.
I don't really care. Whatever, Mars. Yeah, that ring will do for me. So she's actually excited. I think that's interesting that it's not about like love for her. She's, which is fair enough, good for her, you know.
Yeah.
And then we cut back to the professors. They're sheepishly they're asking Potts sorry, fucking me notes.
They're asking her to go in to see Potts, because Potts needs to talk to her. And this is one of the best scenes of the film as far as Barbara Stanwyck is concerned. Yeah, she's so good in like everything anyway, but basically she convinces Potts that the reason that she came to the house is actually because she fell in love with him at first sight when she saw him backstage. Because he basically says that she has to go the following morning, and she's like, oh, but I love you. And he's like, what? And poor I guess like almost infantile Gary Cooper. He's like a child in this.
Literally like a child.
Has no idea. It's like when two primary school kids, when one says to the other that they fancy them and the other one has never like dealt with this before. Yeah. So they just freak the fuck out and leave.
Yeah. No, he's like, I admit I've been beguiled. He used the word beguiled. He's like, I admit I've been beguiled just as the other professors have been. But this just proves that you need to leave because you're too much of a distraction. I can't deal with all these feelings that I'm feeling.
Yeah.
So, like, if anything, this just proves to me that you have to leave. And she's like, okay, whatever, fair enough. Like, she thinks the jig is up. But yeah, she then stands on some books just as one last kind of Hail Mary, if you will. And then she kisses him, and she kisses him again, and she kisses him a third time. And he comically then just runs out. He just runs out
of the room,
up the stairs.
He had said to her, yeah, I had certain feelings towards you, but I got a damp cloth and I put it on the nerve on the back of my neck, which gets rid of those feelings. So what does he do? He darts out the room upstairs to try and find a damp cloth.
Yeah, and then he comes back outside, wetting his neck obviously with this damp cloth. And then he says, can someone call a cab for Sugar Puss? And then he says, listen, he goes into her and he says, listen, maybe in 3 years when the work is finally finished, we can kind of pick up where we left off here. Maybe we can finally see if this thing works out. And then he says, can you do me a favor? She's like, what? And he's like, can you yum me once more? So Miss Bragg then, Miss Bragg feeling all hoity-toity, she's very happy that she's gotten her own way. Cab's outside, she knocks on the door, listen, there's a cab outside. And Potts opens the door and he looks just like the most love-struck teenager you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And he's like, cab? He's like, you feel free to hop in there, Miss Bragg. So, he's pretty... He's just down for Sugar Puss at this point.
Yeah, because in the next scene, what does he do? He goes and buys an engagement ring, God love him. He goes to the local jewelers and he buys a ring. Not quite the ring that Lilac had bought her, but
not quite, no.
It's the thought that counts. Because, and that is literally the point of this scene, because he then goes up, he makes her breakfast in bed, and he puts the ring on top of the toast, and then puts the thing on top of the toast, the cover of the dish, and he brings it up, and he brings her breakfast in bed, and he's like, oh, why didn't you have some toast? And she's like, oh, I'm not hungry. And he's like, no, you should, please, have toast with jam, have some jam. And she's like, I don't really like jam. And he's like, no, just
have some jam.
And she opens the lid to find the ring. She opens it and she straight away, not necessarily knowingly, but like holds it up next to the other ring, because obviously they would go on the same finger anyway.
Course,
But the size difference is outrageous. And basically he says he's in love with her and he wants to get engaged to her. But the difference between his ring and Lilac's ring is he says there's an inscription in it. And she's like, oh, from Richard Ill. And he's like, no, that's Richard III, actually. Basically, he starts reciting Richard III to her, some lovey-dovey stuff. And, they're there's a little bit of sentimentality with that ring, so worth noting. And then, yeah, she doesn't necessarily say yes when all of a sudden all the professors just bundle in, and they say that there's a call for her downstairs from, and I quote, Daddy.
Yeah, so creepy. Fuck's sake. So yeah, Sugar Puss, then she's delighted to hear that her daddy has called. So we hear them on the phone. Joe Lilac directly references, by the way, this is where he directly references the Seven Dwarves.
Yeah.
So the film is not shying away from that comparison whatsoever, that inspiration. She says, listen, there's been a bit of a snag in the plan. One of the professors, after going and obviously falling in love with me, he's like, who cares about that? We're going to get married today. I have someone right here ready to do the ceremony. And then the lads then come outside, they're walking down the stairs, so then she has to change, obviously on a dime, pretend she's talking to her father. So Potts comes down and he's like, listen, I want to speak to your father, because the lads have already then said, listen, traditionally you would get the father's permission. It is the 1940s. So he goes and he's starts to then give him information. He's like, I want to marry your daughter. He starts like, this is my voting history. This is where I went to college. This is where these are my character references. And then Joe Lilac.
Besides one sinus, he's in pretty good health.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and Joe Lilac initially is like, "Oh, just get off the phone, you idiot." And then he has a brainwave. Then he's like, "Okay, I can use this to my advantage." And because obviously the police are looking for Sugar Puss, there's a manhunt out for her. It's going to be quite hard to get her to come to where Joe Lilac is. So he's like, New Jersey. He's like, this is actually kind of genius. He's like, listen, maybe you can get married today. He's like, maybe you can come here. You can get married in front of me and your mother. We have someone here who can do the ceremony. And she's great in this scene, Barbara Stanwyck. She's like, you could see the conflict on her face.
Because Potts literally says, like, opens up and confesses that his own mother had passed away, and it's a shame that she can't be there at the wedding. And yeah, as he said, Barbara Stanwyck's face just drops.
And like she hasn't been too like afraid of kind of playing these guys for fools up to now. But this is the moment where she does start to kind of get like, wonder if she's going too far. Like, this will be actually going too far. Lead this guy on, accept his marriage proposal, think that tell all these guys they're going to a wedding in New Jersey just to kind of harbour a fugitive, just to get rid of a fugitive. Like, it's good for her. She has some morals. So the call ends. Potts says, listen, everyone, we're engaged. The gang are delighted, and Miss Bragg, who hasn't, by the way, resigned, she still is there. She has said that a nurse doesn't leave her epidemic post, so she starts to weep. And then Sugar Puss goes upstairs to get ready. She finds Miss Bragg, who, surprise, surprise, she has found the newspaper. Miss Bragg then is quite, she gets on a high horse. She's like, listen, I knew there was something wrong about you. Just wait till the lads know about this. Sugar Puss tells her the harm's already been done, and she wallops her.
Knocks her out cold.
Apparently, Barbara Stanwyck actually legitimately caught the actress playing Miss Bragg quite hard, so she legitimately, kind of by accident obviously, she legitimately hurt her jaw pretty hard in one of the scenes. So that didn't go down well. Well, that wasn't great. But then she just stashes her in a closet and she locks her in. So Sugar Puss can handle herself, let's put it that way.
Yeah, and the wedding party then head on their way towards New Jersey to go get married. They're told to, is it the Brooklyn Bridge that they're told to look out for? Because that's where they're going to be swarming with police. But they go anyway. And at the police have set up a toll station where they're basically just looking in the windows of every car just to see if they can find her. And very discreetly, the professors just accidentally rear-end a truck at the toll station, should I say? So the police straight away come over. They look in. They don't really take any notice of her. It's more so the professor driving because his license expired
40
years
years.
ago. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
good off.
he manages to play the you know how unlucky it is to stop a wedding card on the policeman, and he's like, all right, go ahead. So, and he lets them go, and this real competent driver then just swerves off the road and crashes straight away into a bunch of trees. And yeah, the next thing we see is Joe Lilac, who gets a phone call because he's obviously been waiting ages
Sorry to
for her
interrupt.
to turn up.
There's a great line, by the way, about Joe Lilac here. So we cut to Joe Lilac and his cronies. They're waiting around because obviously they think that she should have been here already. And Joe says, "What's taking her so long? We're here to enjoy. We're not here to enjoy ourselves. This is a wedding." So it's such a funny line. It's like that sums up how he feels about this. It's just a transaction. Like he is not here for any kind of romance whatsoever.
Yeah, and she calls and she basically says that they're going to be staying in a certain place overnight because there was an accident. Nobody seriously hurt, but she doesn't want to leave him now. She's going to wait till he falls asleep before she walks out on him. And Lilac begrudgingly kind of agrees. But yeah, when they get to this place, then the professors are all kind of talking about how great it is that they're going to get married. It's wonderful for Mr. Potts and stuff. And she kind of can't take it anymore, the guilt. So she leaves the room and she goes back up to the bedroom. And then they all start singing a song to Genevieve, who's the widow of the one professor who was previously
Professor
married.
Oddly,
Yeah, very, very wholesome scene.
yeah, it is. Yeah, and then he's like asking to repeat it because obviously he's quite emotional. So he's been a widower for 24 years. It will turn out. And then we cut back to Sugar Puss. She's in a room debating what to write in her goodbye letter to Potts. And then Potts he wants to ask Audley, who has since gone to bed. He wants to ask Audley because Audley gives this speech about kind of what marriage is and kind of what it entails and stuff like that. So he basically wants some information from Audley or some guidance maybe, but he doesn't want to ask in front of the lads because maybe he's a bit sheepish about that. So he goes to Audley's bungalow to speak to him privately. He doesn't turn on the light, and turns out, well, he's entered the wrong bungalow, but he doesn't notice at this point because he starts to get this speech about kind of what Sugar Puss means to him and like what the idea of finding someone that he's fell in love with, like what that whole thing means to him. And she does a great scene. They kind of what Howard Hawks did was he kind of he put like black soot around her eyes because like her eyes are quite piercing in the scene in the dark, obviously. So you just see like a pair of eyes staring back. He thinks he's talking to Audley, but obviously it's not.
Yeah.
And then she hears this whole spiel from Professor Potts, and she just gets up and yeah, she kisses him. She obviously taken completely by surprise by this whole speech from Potts.
Yeah, and then the lads from outside start calling Potts to come back to where they were, and he comes into the room where they were all singing, and yeah, the gang are all there, and the gang, I mean Ozma Pastrami and the main man himself, Joe Lilac, who after spotting some lipstick on Potts' face, punches him and then tells him the truth about how she was using him, and then basically just continues to berate the man, and they all walk out then, and the police come, so the gang all flee, and we see then from Sugar Puss's window that the police are talking to Potts, and then Potts comes in and basically says that she actually escaped with the gang, and she, again, another great line, she says she wrote a letter, she wrote a list of all of her excuses as to what she had done to him, and it's just a blank sheet of paper.
Yeah.
There is no excuse.
No, there isn't. Yeah, she's starting to understand. Maybe she did take it a little bit too far, even though she obviously didn't want to. But yeah. So yeah, they come back to the house. The gang are obviously all pretty much devastated. Potts then calls himself the lead donkey. He's like, "Listen, it's my fault that we wasted these last few weeks." not getting any research done, and he's like, listen, we're going to have to all work an extra 2 hours a day to make up for this. I'm sorry, it's my fault, but we're all kind of going to have to pay for this now. Then they find the more expensive engagement ring, and they're like, is that your ring? He's like, no, that wasn't the ring I bought, like, that's way too expensive. And then Professor Gurkoff, the psychology professor, he's like, this is very interesting. He's like, the Potts is like, well, it's obviously just a mistake, and he's like, not in the mind of Freud. And he's like, what she did was she kept the ring she wanted, and she got rid of the ring she didn't want. She didn't care about how much either of them cost at that point. She's like, she subconsciously threw away the one she didn't want, and she kept the ring on the finger of the man she did want. So Potts is kind of, he's like, that's a load of baloney, but Goodcroft is pretty convinced. Just then, Miss Totten and her lawyer, Mr. Larson, return, and the escapades of the gang have been all over the papers because, harbouring a fugitive hasn't really gone down well. So she's like, listen, I'm shutting down the project. And obviously she was kind of had feelings for Potts, but obviously he was the guy who was engaged to Sugarpuss. So I think that ship has sailed as far as Miss Totten is concerned. So she doesn't even have to worry about that anymore. And Potts is like, listen, just fire me. I'm the reason that this all happened. Keep the guys on. I'm the person responsible. And just as that happens, then the return of Asma and Pastrami, who come in holding 2 rifles.
Yeah, 2 Tommy guns. Yeah,
Tommy guns. Yeah.
They come in with their Tommy guns. They get everyone up against the wall, and meanwhile, Sugarpuss is refusing to marry Lilac, and it's really pissing Lilac off. Lilac just obviously wants this over with so that she can't testify against them. And we go back to the professors, and the phone rings, and Pastrami puts Potts on the phone, and the the unnamed henchman, as far as I'm aware, hands the phone to Sugarpuss, and the two of them have a brief conversation where he basically just shuts her down. But whenever he hangs up the phone, then he realizes, the other guys realize first that the reason this whole thing is happening, Pastrami lets it slip, but the reason this whole thing is happening, the reason they're all held hostage, is because she's refusing to marry Lilac, and therefore they're all held hostage until she does marry Lilac. To which, it's really funny from Gary Cooper. Potts' voice just gets really high pitched, and he's like giggling to himself again like a child, whilst being held hostage. Again, maybe this is a bit of comeuppance for doing this in the first place, but the garbage man again just wanders into this house
It's so funny.
Unannounced, so ends up also being taken hostage. It's kind of funny. But basically he comes in with another question, and that the answer to said question is that there was a sword held above someone's head by a hair.
Of Damocles, sword of Damocles.
Meanwhile, Pastrami with his Tommy gun is sat down, and there is a large portrait of Mr. Totten above his head, hanging on by a rope. So using their brains and the power of science, and again, after all sorts of fake outs, and Pastrami also just losing his mind and shooting all the inanimate objects in the room, they managed to use the light from the sunlight to reflect off of the microscope to burn the rope that is holding, very Rube Goldberg, I know, burn the rope that is holding the picture frame, which eventually, just before it falls, Potts gets one of the lads to check a certain line in a certain book which says he who is at their highest falls the hardest, something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing, and they all kind of look, and while Pastrami sat there with this big portrait above his head, Asma is sat there on a ridiculously tall stool with a big carpet underneath. So as the rope finally snaps and the portrait falls on Pastrami's head, 2 of the professors yank the carpet from underneath the stool, and Asma also falls and lands on his ass, and all the professors do a runner. And it's something that they also do, but we don't realize just yet, but it's really funny. Sorry, go. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, just before the picture falls, by the way, great scene as Audley is trying to buy some time, Professor Audley. So he's like, okay, will you shoot this 25 or this nickel out of my hand? And Asma is like, yeah, okay, whatever, fair enough. And then he, just as he's about to shoot, then Audley's trying to buy some more time. So like, actually, no, make it like a 50 cent. And then he's like, oh, okay, whatever, fair enough. Smart guy. And then just as he's about to shoot, he's like, actually, no, make this bigger coin again. He's like, he's so afraid, obviously, of his hand being shot to pieces. Because let's be honest, Pastrami has not had a particularly, Asma has not had a particularly good shot so far that we've seen.
Yeah. But they all hop on the garbage the garbage man, should I say. They hop on his truck. And it's funny as well that Miss Totter and Mr. Larson also hop on the back.
Yeah.
Because she's just like, this is the most fun I've had in ages.
Yes.
And they also throw the two gangsters. There's so many funny things going on here. They throw the two gangsters in the back of the truck.
It's genius.
And there's two things going on at the same time.
Yeah.
One, Potts is reading how to learn boxing in a book.
So good.
Whilst just Sakall's character just says, when can we start torturing them? And it turns out that they just tickle him to try and get information out of
They
him.
have
It's
a
so
feather.
funny.
They have a feather and they start tickling them. Tickle torture. I've never seen it before in my life. Tickle torture with a feather. Just to get this information about where Sugar Puss and Joe Lilac are. Eventually, they cave. It's so funny. Eventually, they cave. So they get to the place where the nuptials are about to be underway. So the nuptials are underway. Sugar Puss, it's very funny as well. Every time I guess what would you call it? The
officiator,
The officiator is giving them a line about what to say. Joe Lilac is giving it, and then she'd like just make a wisecrack like, yeah, in a million years. Just 4 or 5 so funny wisecracks. And Joe Lilac is getting progressively more and more pissed off with her. And then she hears the guys singing, and her face lights up, and she's like, I think we have company. And Joe Lilac's like, no, shut up, it's just people outside. She's like, I don't think so. So the guys
and then the
bust up.
incredible reveal.
They bust open the door,
steal the Tommy guns from the henchmen.
So they come in with Tommy guns, and then Audley says, I think this is known as an upstick. And then someone goes, a stick up. It's so good.
Yeah, and then Henry Travers' character, I can't remember his name, just opens fire on the
Professor
ceiling
Jerome
with his Professor Jerome just opens fire on the ceiling with his Tommy gun, and he just starts pointing it at him, and all the other professors are absolutely petrified that he actually just did that. They're all freaking out, and he asks them all to put their hands in the air, but Lilac holds a gun to Sugar Puss's head and tries to escape out the back door. Meanwhile, the garbage man has a big comically large wrench and is just bashing them all in the head individually as they all creep backwards out the back door, until one of the professors gets down on all fours and Joe Lilac trips over him, where he is met with Mr. Potts, ready to stick him up in the back garden.
Yeah. So they have a bit of a fist fight. Joe Lilac gets some licks in first. Look like Joe Lilac is obviously going to take care of Potts quite quickly, but then Potts gets up and very comical, just starts to wind up, and he hits him with this comical uppercut, and he just starts wailing on him. The police arrive, they arrest Joe and his cronies, they throw him in the back of this paddy van. Then Sugar Puss
they throw him in the back of the garbage truck.
Garbage truck. Which is even funnier, let's be honest. And then we cut then to Sugar Puss. She's like, listen, the idea of the marriage isn't going to work. But then Potts kisses her, and the gang just get up and they start to leave. And happy ending. The first happy ending we've had on Romance at the Movies arc.
One of four.
Listen, we saved it till the end at least. So that's Ball of Fire. Screwball comedy, amazing screwball comedy in my opinion. Harry, what's your thoughts?
I had a great time with this. This is hilarious, really enjoyable. It's a lot of things that I like. I like Barbara Stanwyck. I like when Billy Wilder's writing. Turns out I like Gary Cooper. Never seen a Gary Cooper film before. I like him. He's really good in this. All the side characters are great. Dana Andrews plays the gangster so well. Excuse me. Really witty, really funny, really hard to portray how funny it is in a podcast, but trust me, this movie is hilarious. Screwball comedies are kind of hit or miss for me. Sometimes they try too hard to be absurd and then they're not actually funny, whereas others are absurd, but they focus more on the relationship and the writing, and this is one of those ones, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 out of 5. Really, really, really good. And yeah, as you said, an actual nice way to round off Romance at the Movies, because believe it or not, they actually end up together. As we said, 1 out of 4. 1 out of 4. They end up together. How about you?
Yeah, first time I saw this, I gave it 4.5. Second time around, I still gave it 4.5. To be honest, it could have come down to a 4. Like, it was between 4 and 4.5. But I decided to be charitable and generous, and like, I do really love the film. It is a gag a minute or a gag a second. Really, it's like I said, you're laughing so hard at one joke, you've probably missed 2 others, and it's like that throughout the film. Visual gags. Plays on words, which there's a lot of in this movie, because obviously they're writing an encyclopedia, and the main character it's all about slang, the whole film, and the main character is an English professor, so stands to reason there's got to be a lot of that stuff. Barbara Stanwyck is amazing in the lead role, as the lead.
Shock.
Yeah, like it's Barbara Stanwyck. Gary Cooper, like, I've seen him be not so great. I've also seen him be quite good. Like, High Noon is not a film I love as much as other people, but he is really good in the lead role. I can understand why it's such a famous performance. Tony Soprano's favourite actor, by the way.
Interesting. Yeah, I really want to see Design for Living. I really want to see that film, and I know he's in that, so that'll probably be next on my Gary Cooper list.
Yeah. The pilot of Sopranos, Tony Soprano goes in this long monologue about why can't we be like all like Gary Cooper. So I guess from one gangster to maybe another. He hates gangsters in the film, so maybe from that point of view, Tony Soprano wouldn't have liked that. But anyway, I digress. No, it's really, really funny. It zips along it's like a freight train. This movie, it just zips right along. Like I said, jokes, plenty of jokes in there. So yeah, I think it's definitely one of the best screwball comedies that I've seen anyway. And yeah. Great Howard Hawks film, and another great Billy Wilder and Charles Brackett script. So there we are. That's Romance at the Movies arc, and I'll throw it over to you, Harry, to introduce next week's film. What's up for next week?
Yeah, I will do. But first, I'm going to ask a question, because obviously we don't take our awards all that seriously. No. Surely it's okay, I think, anyway. I think that Pastrami and Asma should be a joint entry for Best Random Side Character. How do you feel?
I'm fine.
I think it should be a joint entry.
Because they're never not on screen. Like, they're
always on screen together.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to clear that up before I put them in the ballot. But, yeah, next week, and for the next month, the month of March, we are doing Classic Best Picture winners. Snappy title for that. Academy Classics. There we go. Academy Classics.
Boom.
Golden Hour Film Podcast. Academy Classics. Starting off with a Gary Cooper movie. The first ever Best Picture winner. It's Wings. I've never seen it. You've never seen it. It's Wings. Listen, it feels like an obligatory entry on the podcast, because let's face it is the first Best Picture winner. But that being said, doesn't mean we're not going to have a lot of fun with it. After that, then we have 3 absolute gems as far as their reputation is concerned. Fuck it, we'll just do something different, and I'll just say them now so that people can maybe have time to watch them all. So the 4 Best Picture winners we're going to cover are Wings, The Lost Weekend, which I have never seen, but you have, Shane. Great boy, Billy Wilder.
Yep.
On the Waterfront, which I've seen and I love and you haven't seen. No. And then again, to bookend it with a film that neither of us have seen, Midnight Cowboy, which I am really looking forward to, because yeah, that film has a huge reputation. And yeah, they are the 4 classic Best Picture winners we're going to be covering over the next month. Stay tuned for all sorts of other videos. Can't tell you what they're going to be, but there's going to be other videos, I'm sure. But in the meantime, thank you so much. And that has been the Golden Hour Film Podcast, Romance at the Movies, episode 45. Crazy. Episode 50 is right around the corner. Yeah. But in the meantime, I have been Harry Bailey.
I've been Shane Funny.
And we'll see you next week for Wings, the first ever Best Picture winner. Goodbye.